Hello, I'm Lieutenant Brian Murphy, and welcome to Norwood P.D. Blue. In this episode, we're presenting an extended segment we recently shot with NPA TV. It was actually a question submitted by Isabella for our Ask the Chief segment that gave us the inspiration. She asked, what happens during an arrest? Well, every arrest is different and should be considered a unique situation to the officers involved. Routine is a word we try to strike from our vocabulary. The arrest that we will show is a simple custody at roadside of a motorist that is stopped for a violation and warrants are revealed. There's no pursuit, no struggle, no field sobriety test, and what happens in the station, which the segment will show, is pretty uneventful. Speaking of warrants, we do encourage those with warrants to clear them up on your own. If you know someone that might have a warrant issued for their arrest, tell them to get to court and get a court date set up. Our warrant unit is actively trying to encourage this. We'll also aggressively step up efforts to serve warrants that are being ignored. Our Norwood PD in the rear view segment recalls an early 1980s apartment house fire at a Norwood landmark. The fire was discovered by two police officers whose actions that day were clearly heroic. Our Norwood's Finest segment features a former Norwood High School football star who went on to star in college, the Marine Corps, and is now starring for us as a patrolman on the 4 to 12 shift. Just a few news items before we begin the show. At the beginning of August, we welcomed 3 new officers who graduated from the MBTA Police Academy. They now have completed their additional 10 weeks of field training. All 3 are assigned to the 4 p.m. to midnight shift, where they will be further seasoned until reassigned to their permanent shifts at the new year. They are Diego Silva, Stephen Easter, and Brendan Sweeney. We're excited and encouraged for their future as Norwood police officers. September saw the retirement of Lieutenant Richard Wall after 37 years of service. His departure is additionally significant in that today, for the first time in about 65 years, we do not have a member of the Wall family on the department roster. When Rich joined the department in 1977, he joined his father, Lieutenant John Wall, his brother, Jay Wall, and cousins Billy Wall and Peter Baroni, all patrolmen. Lieutenant Wall's departure resulted in the department making 2 promotions. Chief Brooks promoted Sergeant Michael Benedetti to the rank of lieutenant, and Patrolman William Fundora to the rank of sergeant. We congratulate both men and their families and wish them well as they accept more duties and responsibilities here at the Norwood Police Department. A couple of other items quickly. If you saw the premiere of the Norwood Arena movie at Norwood Theater on September 20th, or the repeat showing on September 28th, you might have noticed the footage at the very beginning of a Norwood police officer directing traffic in the pouring rain. Just in advance of the premiere, we were able to inform producers Jerry Kelleher and Brendan King that the officer was Patrolman Francis Dinny Riley, father of the late Patrolman Jake Riley, and grandfather of Patrolman Kevin and Patrolman Brian that are both serving today. It was a nice touch by the producers to insert the name over the image, and you'll see it yourself when you see the DVD, which is supposed to be available soon. We've seen marked improvement in how Norwood's residents protect their property, specifically their motor vehicles in their driveways. After several incidents where numerous unlocked vehicles were broken into and items of value stolen, we've peppered you with warnings on social media. You've responded, and we appreciate it. It's so easy to lock your car and protect your property. Simply leave valuables out of sight and lock the car. It's that easy. We'll take this opportunity to remind you once again of Massachusetts move-over law. If you see an emergency vehicle, police car, fire apparatus, ambulance, at the side of the road, you are required to move over to the next lane and slow down when passing. Please give the men and women that are doing their jobs on the roadway a break. Help them get home at night, just like you want to. We pledge to strictly enforce the move-over law. We will go after violators when possible. Also, we are cautioning the hunters in the audience that there is no hunting allowed on town-owned land in Norwood. We've had many complaints of hunting and shooting on town-owned land near the airport and beyond Vanderbilt Ave. Officers will be checking the woods, removing tree stands, and summoning violators to court. Hunting on private property may be allowed if written permission from the property owner is given. Hunters would be best advised to have such permission in writing and on their person. And finally, Officer Tomanino was recently recognized for actions he took on Route 28 one morning in August when returning to the station from an assignment to go to the RMV. Finding the passing lane blocked by a stopped Mass State Police cruiser in an apparent crash scene, Officer Nino All right, go back to the beginning of that. I'll do it better. And finally, Officer Tom Menino was recently recognized for actions he took on Route 128 one morning when returning to the station from an assignment to go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Finding the passing lane blocked by a stopped Mass State Police cruiser in an apparent crash scene, Officer Menino positioned his cruiser to protect the officer. He saw that the trooper had removed a man from the vehicle to the ground and learned that the man was in cardiac arrest. Officer Nino retrieved the automatic external defibrillator from his cruiser. Few state police cruisers are so equipped. We've carried them for 10 years. The AED advised that a shock be delivered to the patient. One was delivered and it restored the heart rhythm. By later in the day, the patient had been transferred to a Boston hospital and was resting comfortably. We salute Officer Tom Menino for his actions. Now, on with the show.
How are you? Tony Lopes, Norwood Police. Norwood boy, born and raised here in Norwood. I grew up near Father Max, former Father Max boy. So you people who aren't from Norwood watching this aren't gonna know what that is. I graduated in the class of 1998. In high school I played football, baseball, and I ran track in the winter. We didn't have a nice field like this, but we played up here. I also played in college. I was the captain at Norwood High in 1997. And I was a captain at UMass Dartmouth in 2001. In 2001, after football was over, I came back for one more season and coached at UMass Dartmouth. And then after that, I left school and I joined the Marine Corps. I did 5 years in the United States Marine Corps. I've always wanted to be a police officer. My uncle was a Connecticut State Trooper. He just recently retired. I also had, when I played baseball in high school, I had Coach Begley. And Beggs is on the job with me now, and I've just known a lot of the guys that are on. My best friend got on the job a couple years before me, so when I was in the Marine Corps, I came home and took the test. Just something I've always wanted to do. I got on the job in 2009. Since then, I'm a defensive tactics instructor, a pepper spray instructor, simunitions instructor, firearms instructor. I ride the mountain bike. And I'm also a member of the Metro SWAT team. You know, I like being a police officer in the town I grew up in. I like to give back to the community and, you know, trying to make it a better place and make Norwood the same as it was when I was growing up.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Brian Murphy. For over a century, it has stood at the intersection of Washington Street, Walpole Street, and Guild Street, greeting visitors from the south and southeast to Norwood Center. True townies would know the building as the Talbot Block. Many might identify it by a prominent business located on the street level: Jack and Harry's, Guild Pharmacy, Hinton's Gift Shop, New England Comex, or even Duke's is Guild variety. The police department knows it by the address for the 37 apartments located on the second and third floors. 738 Wash. We go back to the afternoon of the 9th of December 1981 for this episode's history segment, as it was on this day that Norwood came closest to losing this familiar landmark to fire. Quick action by the police department and fire department saved everyone in the building and the building itself. The first call came in at 3:26 p.m. and it came from Patrolman James Kelly and Patrolman Dick Joseph. They were passing the building on Washington Street when Kelly noticed smoke and then flame coming out of a third-story window near where the Union Warren Bank connects to the Talbot Block today. He and Joseph were quickly in the building and to the second and third floors, where they started banging on doors and evacuating tenants. Meanwhile, the fire department was alerted, both by the police dispatch and the first call from the apartment where the fire had started. The apparatus was just returning from a run to Davis Avenue. Lieutenant Paul Butters, a young firefighter at the time, recalls that they had just passed the Talbot block on the way back, didn't see any smoke. But by the time they had got back to the station and not even off the truck, when the fire dispatch was sending them back, the police were calling for help at 738 Wash. When they responded, flames that were coming out of the windows were licking the roof line of the building. Patrolman and Kelly were joined by others and responding firefighters in evacuating the building. Sergeant Bill Travers directed all other resources of the police department to the fire scene and surrounding area. Fire departments from Westwood, Walpole, Canton sent equipment. Ultimately, the damage was contained to the area of the building where the fire started. 2 explosions, believed to be ignited aerosol cans, blew out windows, knocked 1 firefighter to the floor. In all, 8 firefighters were hospitalized. 4 police officers, including Kelly and Joseph, with smoke inhalation, and Sergeant Travers with chest pains. He was treated and released at Norwood Hospital. One of the firefighters, it was learned, suffered a heart attack during the fire on the roof. He would not work again. 4 residents had to be evacuated through the windows to the aerial ladder and the waiting arms of firefighters. All other residents and occupants were guided out of the building by the police and firefighters, and would you believe it, some were even reluctant to evacuate. In the final analysis, Thomas Barry, the chief of the fire department, revealed the fire was caused by careless disposal of smoking materials. He and Police Chief George de Blasi joined in commending members of both departments on their heroic actions on that afternoon. Surely, had the fire started later in the evening or in the late night hours when many, if not all of the 37 apartments were occupied, the threat to the structure and the tenants likely to be home and sleeping would have been devastating.
Hello, I'm Chief Bill Brooks of the Norwood Police Department. In this episode of Norwood PD Blue, we're going to do something a little different with Ask the Chief. We're not going to focus on a specific question like we normally would, because we get a lot of questions about what happens during the arrest process, how a prisoner is searched and why, and what really goes on behind the doors at the police station when someone comes in under arrest. So what we've decided to do for this segment is to take a fairly standard arrest right from start to finish. The arrest that you'll see doesn't involve any side issues such as a non-compliant motorist or the seizure of contraband or the seizure of weapons or anything along those lines. You won't see a breathalyzer. This motorist isn't drunk. We're just going to take a case of a motorist pulled over for a traffic infraction who, as it turns out, is wanted by the police because he has an outstanding warrant. And we're going to take it from the point of the stop, right through his being transported to the booking center at the police station, and his being processed, and then placed in a cell. And we're going to take you through it a step at a time in hopes that we answer most of the questions that you have about that process. So thank you for tuning in. So we're going to start with a patrol officer who's just out on routine patrol. We're riding along today with Officer Eric Kaskovich, who is on Route 1, as you can see, headed northbound. He's approaching the intersection of Moore Street, controlled by a traffic signal. And this car that's in the right-hand turn lane, right in front of Officer Kaskovich, is going to be the motorist that we're going to pull over in just a moment. Now, this motorist hasn't done anything wrong, but we're going to simulate a traffic stop here, and we will start the process. So you see here that the motorist has rolled a stop sign, did not come to a stop as required, and so Officer Kaskovich is going to pull him over. So obviously he activates his blue lights and the motorist comes to a stop. You see Officer Kaskovich turning the wheel so that if the car is rear-ended during the stop, it will shoot out to the left as opposed to driving it into the motorist that he has stopped. And this is a safety precaution that police officers are taught at the academy.
Motor vehicle stop, Carnegie Row at Astor Ave, Mass Reg 41 Zulu, Delta 92.
Roger. All control now at 679.
Sometimes when motorists are stopped by the police, they feel somewhat uncomfortable during the encounter, especially the first section of it. And you see here that Officer Kaskovich has positioned himself behind the center post of the car, or something we call the B-pillar. And that's in case the motorist opens the door sharply, that the officer will not be pushed into traffic. So that's why the officer stands back, where you see Officer Kaskovich standing here. Most stops start with a request for the license and registration, and most often our officers tell the motorist what kind of violation they've committed. Here the motorist has produced his registration and his driver's license. And Officer Kaskovich tells him that he'll be right with him, and typically the officer will tell the motorist to sit in the car. And this is also for the motorist's safety as well as the officers.
Norwood 664, no control.
No control.
Can you run that plate please all the way through? Once again, that's Mass Reg 41 Zulu, Delta 92. It's going to be owner-operator.
Roger.
Who's the motorist?
He's gone. Brian Woodrow, kid that works with him on the cables.
Is that cute with the hat?
Yeah.
Oh.
Control, oh, it's 664.
Norwood 64.
41ZD902, active, 2008 Ford Fusion, color blue. Michael Maloof out of Boston. Thought he has a warrant. Larceny, mal damage, active Class D license.
Roger. Can you call next in line for a hook, please?
All control now at 679.
Norwood 679.
You back up the car stop, Carnegie at Astor.
You will often see two of our cruisers on a stop, and this can happen for a number of reasons. If we can get a second car to the stop, we do that just because it's safer. But we always make sure a second officer is on scene if the motorist is going to be arrested or if the car is towed. Sometimes people respond negatively or even violently when they learn that they're going to be taken into custody or that the car is going to be towed.
Mind just shutting the keys off? Mind stepping out of the car? Sure. Just have to talk to you about someone.
Officer Kaskovich here is returned to the car and is asking the motorist to just step out of the car with him and step to the roadside. The officer will make sure here that there's no traffic coming before he lets the motorist out. He tells the motorist why he's being placed in custody, and then he handcuffs him. So this motorist has been handcuffed, and you see Officer Kaskovich double locking the cuffs so that they do not tighten once the motorist is placed in the cruiser. We don't want to have too much conversation with motorists at this point in time except to let them know that they're under arrest and they will be handcuffed, and then we can answer their questions. But it is important at this stage that the handcuffs be applied quickly so that if the motorist reacts negatively, his safety and the safety of the officers is not jeopardized by having the incident spill out into the travel lane. Officer Kaskovich here has been joined by Officer Sweeney, and after the motorist is searched, he'll be placed in the cruiser. The search at this point is primarily to recover any weapons or obvious contraband that is on the operator who's being arrested. Officer Kaskovich has guided the prisoner into the back of the cruiser and has made sure that the prisoner doesn't bump his head. And that's why officers lots of times will put their hand on the top of the prisoner's head to guide them into the rear of the cruiser. Now, Officer Kaskovich will head back to the police station to begin to book his prisoner, and Officer Sweeney will stand by and wait for the wrecker to arrive. Officer Kaskovich has called for a tow truck, and we use a rotating system of wreckers that are based in Norwood. The dispatcher calls the wrecker company and asks for a tow, gives them the location, and lets them know that an officer is standing by.
Norwood Police call. Can I have a tow truck to Carnegie Row at Astor Ave for an arrest? Thank you.
Dispatchers play a key role in this process, of course, because they are on the phone or on the radio and are able to check data sources for the officer, order tows, and so forth. Typically, when a motorist is arrested and there is no one with him who can drive the car, we tow the vehicle. And we do that for a few reasons. Primarily, we're responsible for it, and leaving it out on the roadway is not a good idea, so we tow the vehicle back to a tow yard. All arrests made by the Norwood Police Department are reviewed by a supervisor. The supervisor's job is to ensure that there was probable cause for the arrest and to make sure that the prisoner was not injured. Lieutenant Benedetti here is removing his firearm and putting it in a lockbox, which is just outside the cell block. And that is to make sure that there are no firearms anywhere within our booking and prisoner area. Now, on the rear of our station, we have a series of doors, two of which are called sally ports. A sally port was an area where a large number of troops would pass to get from one area to the next. So the name sally port has been carried forward, and it is now often used to describe the area where the police will bring in a prisoner. And this system is very carefully designed to be safe. You see that the door was opened remotely by the dispatcher, and then the cruiser pulls in. Before the prisoner is taken out of the car, the officer will secure his weapon, because he will be going into the same area that Lieutenant Benedetti just entered. And now, once the officer has taken off his firearm, only now will he remove the prisoner from the cruiser and walk him into the secure booking area. You see the numbers on the garage doors, and that is so the dispatchers can tell from their system by watching the security cameras in the police station just which door the officer has used. The prisoner is here being brought into a holding tank area for processing. Now, this will not be the cell where he will be held to await bail. This is just used for the processing of the prisoner. Officer Kaskovich now is going to search him a second time, and this will typically be more thorough than the search that he performed on the street. He is not only going to check for weapons again and check for contraband again, but he's really going to remove everything from the arrestee's pockets. And this is an inventory process. We do it to make sure that we have identified any valuables being carried by the person arrested, to safeguard the department and the town against a claim that property was lost or stolen during the arrest process. The officer will also remove things such as any belts or shoelaces to make sure that the prisoner cannot harm himself while inside the cell. Some prisoners who have been arrested become despondent and harm themselves, and suicides have occurred in police lockups. So our officers are very careful as a matter of policy and training to ensure that everyone who goes in the cell is safe and that we have safeguarded their well-being. Now the arrestee is asked to sit, kick off his shoes, and now to answer questions posed by the supervisor. Lieutenant Benedetti will perform now a couple of functions, many of which are mandated by state law and others mandated by department policy. All people arrested by the department are informed of all of the charges against them. They're also told whether or not they will be able to make bail. Sometimes people arrested on default warrants are not allowed to be bailed, and people arrested for violating domestic violence restraining orders are not eligible for bail. Most other prisoners are, and there's a fee that is paid when a prisoner is bailed.
Brian, do you understand you're under arrest? That's the reason you're here? Yes. Okay, and the charge against you is you get a warrant for malicious damage of property, okay? Do you understand that? No. Okay. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have one present while you're being questioned. You cannot afford to hire a lawyer. One will be appointed to represent you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer any questions now without a lawyer, you can stop at any time. Do you understand these questions?
Yes.
You want to talk to us? Do we have any questions for you?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to let you use the phone with an hour being brought in here, okay? We'll let you use a couple phone calls for arrange for bail, let your family and friends know where you are. That's actually posted right up above me on the wall there. You can read along with it. Okay, so we'll give you a phone call as soon as possible.
Under state law, every arrestee is informed of his right to make a telephone call. And of course, as a matter of case law and constitutional law, every prisoner is told of his Miranda warnings. We also record the information of everyone we have arrested. We want to make sure that we have correct data: their name, address, date of birth, where they work, their parents' names, descriptors such as their height, weight, hair, and eye color. We inform every person arrested of all of the property that we found on them, and we show it to them in writing. And we then ask them to sign that they agree that that is the property they were carrying when they were arrested. And again, this is to protect the town and the department from liability. Of course, everyone we take into custody is photographed. And the background of the mugshot is standard statewide. It's an 18% gray background, so that if the photos are needed for a photo array process, the backgrounds will match. This helps us record what the prisoner looked like when he was arrested, and it helps us record that the prisoner was not injured as well. In addition to photographs, most people arrested are also fingerprinted. And back in the old days, a person's fingers would be rolled on ink and then be rolled onto a card. Today, everything is digital, and those fingerprints are then transmitted electronically from Norwood to the State Police Crime Lab and then to the FBI Identification Division in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And we receive information back on those prints, typically within 5 minutes. What used to take weeks now takes minutes. Under Massachusetts law, we are only required to allow an arrestee to make a single phone call and for specific purposes. But we routinely let prisoners make a reasonable number of telephone calls, and we assist them in any way we can in determining whether or not they can make bail and making arrangements to be picked up and to let their family know where they are. Our cells look much different than what most people visualize. Back in the day, they used to have bars on them, and that was simply to allow for airflow, because people are sometimes in a confined area for a long period of time. But modern cells don't have bars anymore. They have a polycarbonate, Lexan, on the door, and the doors are very heavy and made of steel. Instead of using bars, there is a circulation system where air is pushed through the cells, and there's a space at the bottom of the door to allow for air circulation. And the purpose of not having bars on the doors is to prevent suicides. If it's cold or if a prisoner asks for it, we typically provide a blanket, and Lieutenant Benedetti is doing that here. This prisoner was arrested on a warrant and will probably be at the police station a short period of time, but we make people as comfortable as we can. Here you see that Lieutenant Benedetti has already been told that the prints are back from the FBI, and he will be able to check them, check the person's record, and determine whether or not the person is wanted in other states or whether he has a criminal record elsewhere. So you had a chance to see how we process someone who we've taken into custody, and I hope that we've answered most of your questions. As I mentioned before, the arrest that you just saw involved a fairly basic custody involving someone who was compliant and not intoxicated and where there was not contraband seized. So this was a fairly simple process. The Norwood Police Department takes several hundred people into custody every year. And we do that for the purpose of protecting the public, obviously. But every arrest brings with it the potential for injury, for civil liability, and so forth. And so as a result, we're very, very careful. And everything that we do is scripted by state law, department policy, and oftentimes both. If you have questions for me, you have questions for the department, or you have topics you'd like to see us cover in future episodes of Norwood P.D. Blue, I'd ask you to contact us and let us know. After all, the show is for you, and we seek to answer your questions, and we want to give you the information that you need to learn more about what the Norwood Police Department does for you. So I'm Chief Brooks, and I want to thank you for watching.